in old cigarette tins and placed them on the windowsill to prevent scurvy. Vivian sighed happily as she looked around at all the precautions she was now allowed, if not obliged, to take. She slept more deeply that night than I had ever known, her hair splayed dramatically over the pillow and her arms hanging carelessly from the sides of the bed, snoring softly. So that is how I remember the beginning of the war. Wet flannels and sand and cress growing from damp cotton wool folded flatly in tins. There were no maps spread across the kitchen table, no series of small swastikas marking Hitler's progress through the smaller countries of Europe, like in the history books that came after. There was no talk in our yard of concentration camps or of the rise of European dictatorship or of German economic stagnation. I know all that now, but it has been added later, laid gently over the bits I remember, like tracing paper. And that is the problem with the beginnings of things.
Michael. It is a strange thing, sleeping with morphine. It rocks you, gathers you into its dark arms and slithers with you over the surface of sleep. It softens nightmares like bath water and dulls the crashing, skidding pain in my throat. In the mornings, I feel it pricking the edges of my skin, nestling in the cracks of my elbows and along my spine. It leaves my mind empty, alert. In the mornings, I remember everything. I remember sequences of kings and queens, and the order of stations on the Northern Line, both branches. I remember Darwin's lists of sub-races of pigeons and how to tell a gurney from a Logan, and I remember the long stories that Brendan Hardcastle used to tell me after school when we sat with swinging legs on the high wall that ran along the back of our yards, for Brendan always knew everything before I did. It was Brendan who first told me about Mr. Samuel Finley Breeze Morse. He told me that in 1844 Sam Morse attended the first public exhibition of his newly invented code. The display was held in the chamber of the Supreme Court of the United States of America in Washington. A young lady came forward and selected the words that Sam Morse was to send to his associate in Baltimore. She laid a piece of paper on the table in front of him, and the first message ever to be transmitted via an insulated electromagnetic wire was tapped out in full view of the United States Commissioner of Patents, the young lady's father. The message arrived in Baltimore and was sent back over the same wire, and both times it asked the same question. What hath God wrought? Twice transmitted, twice greeted with gasps, and twice left hanging unanswered and ignorant of its own magnitude. After all, the 20th century was not yet so much as a glint in the eye of the 1800s, and that young lady could not possibly have known what the 20th century would bring for two small boys swinging their legs over a bank wall in 1931. But what Brendan could not yet tell me was that 97 years after that first message was sent, at the age of 20, and with a dent of 41 years already blown into the sides of the new century, we would be wedging our knees into the dusty cracks of the Abyssinian desert, and flattening our Royal Signals hats against our chests as Alf's body was lowered into the ground. He could not tell me that when he turned his burnt neck to look at me that day I would not be able to hold his eyes, and that as I lay awake in bed that night I would remember the young lady in the chamber of the Supreme Court, and I would think to myself, what indeed?